reduce crime in North Minneapolis, we must implement dynamic concentration. In order to do this, we need to lay out lucid rules and guidelines that, if broken, will result in clear consequences. We will begin this process with a small group of individuals that are usually well-behaved but may commit moderately severe crimes. When these offenses have been committed, we can no longer threaten to punish a criminal, only to fail at following through with the sanction. We cannot wait until the third, fourth, or fifth time the person has committed such an offense before we decide that the time is proper to punish them. In order to make our threats credible, we must follow through with sanctions. If a rule is broken, the consequences must occur, no exceptions. Not only do we need to follow through with the sanction, but we also need to be swift in order for these punishments to be effective. We will make this process quick by simplifying the process of accusation. By enforcing swift and consistent sanctions, we believe that North Minneapolis' crime rate will decline because people will see that they can no longer get away with their crimes. We believe this is the only way to reduce the current crime rate. As Mark Kleiman said and proved in his HOPE study done on a group of probationers in Hawaii, the more credible a threat is, the less often it has to be carried out.
Along with this dynamic concentration, the dabbling will decrease, and concentration will actually help save police resources. It will lead to a decline in reemergence of crime, and also lessen the cost, and eventually lessen the amount of police needed. Resource-intense bursts of enforcement will lead to a rapid decline in prevalence and lowered effort that is put on the police.
We also believe that crime in North Minneapolis can be reduced by focusing efforts on specific problem areas. One way to do this is with concentrated warnings. The police in New York warned all crack dealers in a certain area and gave them the option of quitting or going to jail instead of just simply arresting them. By using this method, all the dealers were removed at the same time, eliminating the entire market in the area. Police could use the same technique to reduce crime in North Minneapolis.
Just like a doctor would remove a suspicious mole, police need to get rid of the minor problems of the community before they multiply and become worse. It is most important for police officers to keep order rather than become crime investigators. By walking a beat and cracking down on small infractions that give a neighborhood a sense of disorder, police will prevent an area from becoming a crime-ridden slum. The recent trend of reduction in the number of police officers nationwide makes preventative policy a priority over crime fighting and investigation. With fewer and fewer police officers to go around each year, we need a plan to make sure crime does not go up or even stay steady. By cracking down on the vagrants, drunks, panhandlers, and loiterers, the sense of order that is needed to prevent serious crimes can be restored. With a sense of order comes more community involvement that is key to cutting down on crime. When there is no order, people do not get involved in the crime they see around them because they fear repercussions or they believe police cannot or will not help. However, when there is a sense of order, the community begins to police itself. In an orderly community, there is less crime and therefore less need for police because parents and neighbors scold unruly youngsters, public drunkenness is punished, loiterers are told to move on, and panhandling is restricted. By cracking down on the small crimes that lead to a sense of disorder in a neighborhood, the community is encouraged to get involved and make sure one broken window does not turn into 1,000. By applying this logic, crime can be prevented in the future, and by deploying more police to crime-ridden neighborhoods and neighborhoods on the brink to carry out this plan, crime will be effectively curtailed.
The broken windows theory is based on how crime goes up when initial crime is left unpunished. And we can use this to crack down on initial crime. And the example that is given is that when a window is smashed or broken, and then it is not fixed or replaced, soon all of the windows will be smashed. And the whole theory is based upon the fact that if crime goes unpunished, then one crime will rise and ensue because the society begins to accept crime as a norm. Zimbardo did an experiment that proves this theory to be correct in affecting, or to harnessing crime, I guess. He placed a car with its hood up in the Bronx and a car with its hood up in Palo Alto. The car in the Bronx was immediately vandalized, and the windows were knocked out, etc. While the car in Palo Alto went untouched for a week. And only after Zimbardo took a sledgehammer to it did people then begin to vandalize the car, proving the broken windows theory to be true. So basically, through the knowledge of what the broken windows is we need to stop this crime before the windows become, when one window is smashed, we need to concentrate, harness it, and sustain the crime rather than letting that expand out to more windows.
In practice, we believe the police should crack down on seemingly insignificant and petty crimes as part of a larger effort to prevent windows from being broken in the first place, as this will ultimately result in a reduction of serious crime. In order to take the broken windows theory and put it into practice, more police patrols and specifically foot patrols are necessary to maintain order in the community. Through making informal restrictions on public behavior and having the officers enforce these, the slippery slope of crime becomes a non-issue. Panhandling never becomes theft, and theft never becomes assault because panhandling isn't permitted in the first place. Police should therefore stop any behavior that is disorderly and could lead to further problems if left unchecked. Putting more cops on the beat would be costly for the city, but the benefits would be worth the increased cost. For one, this strategy would invite increased community involvement, as this strict enforcement of community behavior will invite similar efforts by community leaders. The community and police will become collaborators in creating a safe area. This collaboration not only improves the community's attitude toward the police, but it would improve the police's attitude toward the public. The effort to combat crime cannot be effectively employed by some foreign police force that drops in whenever there's a big problem and then leaves until the next big problem arises. Such an approach by the police does nothing to combat the root disorder that leads to crime, and it invites a culture of distrust among the public. Despite our suggestion that the police funding would need to be increased, the police can't and shouldn't be in all places at all times. So any meaningful effort to combat crime requires the public's support and participation. Through putting more cops on the street, focusing on maintaining order, and getting the public involved, the permissiveness that fuels the crime rate will be reduced.
I want to go ahead with your questions.
In the article, it says that crime rates do not necessarily go down using the broken window theory. Why should the general public think that it's an effective police tactic then?
You want to go to the question then answer?
I'll take it. Well, it might not go down immediately, not in the short run, but the sense that people feel safer because you're not being bothered by drunks on the street and whatnot is what's really important. And in the long run, it might actually decrease crime, and that's what's really important. And we just need to have patience to let it work itself out. And it might, I mean, if people feel safe, what's wrong with it, you know? I mean, they don't need to know the actual statistics, but people actually aren't bothered just as much by being bothered by other people just from being drunk and whatnot. It's just as much as they're bothered from being assaulted. So that's out of the question. We helped it.
Do you guys want to ask them a question so that you don't feel like being taken?
All right, we'll ask a question. As part of the dynamic concentration theory, it involves focusing police support and putting officers in specific areas of the city to kind of focus on one area. Now, should the citizens in areas that aren't in that specific area feel threatened or concerned that their police force has declined in their area to put more people in the specific area?
I think it's not like the police are necessarily abandoning all the people, let's say, in other districts. It's more of, it's been proven, like we talked about in the introduction with the hope theory, that when you take, let's say, one area, you can even, let's put it down to like a micro example. Like, let's say you take 10 people out of the chain of 50. When you tell the first 10 people that they're going to be punished for every crime that they do, their incentive for committing crime continues to go down and down as more sanctions are placed. And you hit a certain threshold where once these first 10 people no longer have an incentive to commit a crime, you slowly start waning police down the chain to the next 10 people. It's like a slow waning process. It's not only the cops are going to be focused on 10 people at a time. It's more of a gradual trickle-down effect, so eventually all 50 people on the list are no longer committing crime.
Yeah, you go.
You said that in your opening, one of the most important parts was you couldn't have cops everywhere at all times, and so you would need community involvement. What do you do with an apathetic community? How do you counter that when the people don't necessarily want to help you, and you
them for their support.
The part of the foot patrols is to get police on the ground and walking by the houses, walking by the shop owners, and not just walking by and making sure that they see you, but it's actually interacting with them, so that there's that level of trust built up. They know someone personally to be able to go to when it's later at night or early in the morning and crime's happening. They have confidence with somebody in the police department to be able to call and say there's something going on. There's a sense of safety in the community knowing that there is police walking around. Someone has the sense of community to be able to watch the neighborhood, and when they do see something, actually step up. It's a gradual effect. It'll start with 2 or 3 people gaining that confidence, but then once other people notice that, it'll ripple out throughout the whole community.
Okay, when you talked about your gradual trickle-down effect, that's just in one particular area, correct? And then how long would it take for that one particular area to show a drastic reduction in the crime rate?
I'll take it. I think with the clear rules and clear consequences, it would be really kind of fast. If they see that everyone doing a crime is getting their punishment and or at least much, much higher percentages, it would drastically reduce the reasons, and the trickle down would be the first 10 would get caught, and the next 40 would see them get caught and realize that they're probably not going to gain anything from this. So maybe it wouldn't work with only the first batch getting in trouble, but you move on maybe once, and the next 30 get the message or something like that, and that would let us, as crime would shift away from these areas, follow it and go and concentrate where the next problem arises, and fairly quickly, at least in my mind, go through and
Could you be a little more specific using data that was used in the article? Kind of. Like the trials?
Well, let me help you out on this one, going back and forth here. But, so when you're talking about the data and the trials and stuff like this, the idea is, in Ward 9, I believe it was Ward 9, in New York City, there was this thriving drug market going. They were all just out on the streets, whatever, plain invisible as can be. And it was actually one of the sergeants of the police department. Every day he had to drive through those streets, and he saw this. It's obviously going to bother him. He's out there to stop crime, and there it is right in plain eyesight. And they've been going for about 30 years, just a strong market. So finally he decided, you know what, we're going to concentrate all of our cops right here, or we're just going to completely wipe it out. And so that's what they did. They dynamically concentrated right on that. And in doing so instead of just taking out one drug dealer, another one's going to fill his spot. But by taking out all 30 at the same time, you created a vacuum hole where nobody else could fill it up. And at the same time, when they're concentrating on that, that doesn't mean that they're still not looking at drug dealers in Ward 8 or, in Greenwich Village or Manhattan, but they're just concentrating more sources there than they are in the other ones, just to wipe them all out at once.
But how long would that take?
I think that took him, he said, I want to say it was about 6 months, which when you think about the enormity of how many drug dealers he wiped out, you're still going to have to do the regular. So if you're busting one drug dealer, you still have to get evidence on him. You still have to do the behind-the-scenes work. You have to do the fake drug deals with him with your undercover cops. So, you're still doing that, and you're still going to have the same prep work there. But because all the cops are doing it at once instead of just one cop doing it, it's not really going to expand the time any, because you have more cops doing the same job.
It's you again.
Okay, so my question is, no matter how good the windows look, is a sense of safety or order possible if assaults, murders, thefts, and drug dealings are still taking place?
Well, that's kind of the idea behind our policy, is the fact that if we are eliminating the vagrants or the drunks out, is that the more serious crimes will be eliminated. We have seen that in the past in other places. places, and that's what we hope to do with Minneapolis. So if that were occurring down the line, that would be something that would need to be reevaluated and looking at our plan of attack. But we feel that with ours, that we don't have to worry about assaults, murders, and other serious crimes, because if we're taking such action against petty crimes, then the larger crimes should in time go away.
Through the community involvement in sort of policing itself?
Through the community involvement in policing itself, like people taking notice of a stronger, more tight-knit community, that people will avoid causing such harm.
But don't they only do that if they have a sense of order or security already? So it's sort of begging the question to say that they would police themselves.
Well, that was kind of one of the questions you asked earlier, is would it happen? Not necessarily right away. It would have to start with just a few people, but it would, as you said, a ripple effect. It would grow, and it would become that. So not right away would murders, assaults, etc. go away, but in due time, when the ripple effect has increased, it will go away.
Right, and that's it, right? We've done all the questions? Or do we have one? I think we have one more. Sorry, apologies.
How would your program address petty crimes and gateway crimes? Because if you're focusing on the bigger crimes, what would be your response to something that's smaller?
Actually, when you think about addressing petty crimes, there's actually another example from New York City, which some might look at it as broken windows, but I also believe it's really a dynamic concentration approach too. In the tunnel into Manhattan, there was all these squeegee men, and they would jump out and want to wash your windshield wiper, wash your windshield for you, and then they require payment. And people, not that, okay, a couple dollars here, it's not like they're robbing your house or assaulting. Well, they felt it is a form of assault, but it's not like murder or any of that. So most people, most officers at one point in time were just like, whatever, we're not going to waste our time on this. We've got murders and homicides and all that to solve. But when they decided that, we're going to concentrate right there on that tunnel, we're going to put police officers there so that every time a squeegee man tries to do this, we're gonna stop it. And in doing so, they pretty much completely wiped out the problem. And so people are feeling less threatened. So dynamic concentration can be applied to petty crimes as to larger crimes, but just by focusing your attentions and making sure every act or misdemeanor receives its consequences, it does not take long for people to realize, I'm going to get punished for what I'm doing, and for them to stop doing it.
Doesn't that take a lot of resources if you're going to do that for every petty crime or every crime that's a problem?
No. Oh, okay. The whole, one of the main ideas behind our theory is that punishment for crime is actually cost, not to only the person who's being caught, but also to police. It's very expensive to apprehend criminals, to keep criminals in jail. The whole point of dynamic concentration is to reduce the threat of crime. It's more like if you use a little punishment, it will go a long way. If you focus, the problem with your author is that it assumes you have to tackle all people committing crime in one area at once, whereas dynamic concentration, the whole point is we focus on a few people committing crimes at once, and that spills over because you can't address all problems at one time because it becomes too much of an overload. Even if you're just focusing on petty crimes, it doesn't matter. Your author kind of makes the claim that, just make sure everyone stops, peeing in public, or make sure that everybody stops, panhandling in the streets. Whereas our theory, whether you're focusing on a petty crime or a serious crime, focuses on a few select group of people. It's going to be more cost effective in the long run because it will have a spillover effect, whereas your theory doesn't really have the same sort of spillover.
What I'm saying is, if you have so many focus areas, won't that get kind of costly too? Because what we're doing is we're having many people and we're changing the social attitude towards it, like the mimes in Bogota. We're changing the social attitude about stuff, and you guys are just...
You can't really deny that focusing costs a lot of money. It does, the 6-month period of time targeting the drug dealers cost a lot of money. However, what it yielded was a near zero attention from it then on. So it saves resources later on. And yes, it costs a lot of money then, but if you look 3 years later, after the drug market is destroyed, after the police no longer have to go in and deal with individual drug dealers, individual crime associated with these drug dealers, that in turn kind of reaps the benefits, kind of.
I think when you talk about changing the culture and you say we don't intend to change the culture, I think we very much do. We're just doing it in a different way. We're changing our culture to, like, knowing that if you commit a crime, you will be punished and it will not, like, gain you any economic advantage. So, like, it will reduce, like, people's reasons to commit crimes instead of it, like, you're trying to change the culture to where the general public is crying out against crime. And I think ours will be much more effective in the long run.
And in addition to that, we are changing the culture of crime. Just because if you're living in this district where there's this thriving drug market out on the streets, and every day you walk through that, then to have that gone, you're gonna feel safer walking those streets because those drug dealers are no longer out on every corner selling drugs. Or if you, every day on your way to work you drive through that Manhattan tunnel and there's those squeegee men and you feel assaulted every time they jump out at you, to have that gone, you're not gonna feel that assault and you're gonna feel safer every day when you drive. So I mean, we're coming about with the same effect. I mean, we're changing the culture of crime where people feel safer to walk on their streets if there's not the murders, there's not the drug deals and all that going on. We're just doing it by concentrating our resources at one time to try to wipe out the problem and create a void where there's not drug dealers anymore because the drug dealers are in jail, they've had their consequences.
The way I see it, you guys are concentrating on like one or two particular issues while we're addressing like more, like we're addressing almost every issue and we're addressing like gateway crimes and stuff like that.
Not only the issue either, but like you guys concentrate in the one area. The drug dealers aren't going away. You just lock up the ones that are in that area. They're going to move to a different area where you have less cops, less protection, and that in turn will just basically shift the crime to a different area.
Couldn't you look at it? Say, couldn't you look at it as like you guys are kind of treating the symptoms where we're solving the problem? Because the people that are selling drugs didn't just wake up and say, today I'm going to commit my first crime and it's going to be selling drugs. Those are the people that started with the broken windows and started just doing the more minor things and realized they could get away with it. So by stopping that, like, aren't you cutting the tree at the bottom?
Well, that's right. They woke up and realized that they could make money and they could gain an economic advantage by selling drugs. And if we're taking that away, it'll stop their reason to move from gateway crimes to the bigger crimes.
We're disincentivizing it earlier in the chain before they commit the minor crimes. You guys are just preventing them from going from minor crimes to the major crimes.
Once we prevent them from stepping up, we can treat the smaller ones, and we'll do it in a quicker,
which is more
cost-effective way.
Debatable.
If I may interject, you guys are getting on our case about, having all this cost. But where is the money for this on the beat policemen going to come from? I do believe in your first opening statement, it was said that it is going to cost more money than now because you're going to have all these cops on the beat and taking care of the little problems and all the little problems. You're saying that you're trying to cut it off at the base? Well, that's going to cost a lot of money.
Well, I'm just wondering how much money it's going to cost. Like, how many concentrations are you going to have? Like, what areas are you going to concentrate in? Like, and how concentrated are they going to be? You know what I mean?
It's one at a time.
Yeah, that's kind of slow, isn't it? We're starting.
What's slower? Stopping drug dealing by stopping people peeing in alleys, or stopping drug dealing by going to drug
you address
dealers?
other topics besides just that. Cops will stop drug dealing too.
The only problem is though, if you're out walking on the streets every single day, and if you're telling people, if you're drunk, get off the streets, if you're peeing on the streets, if you're stopping all that crime, yeah, at the same time, if you're in a poor neighborhood, and so you're in this poor neighborhood where there's not a lot of economic income coming from. That doesn't mean just because people aren't, peeing on the streets and stuff like that, that those youth don't have incentives to sell drugs to make money. How are you, just because you don't have the riffraff on the streets doesn't mean that the youth and
I know,
stuff
but you
like
have
that.
more cops on the streets, so they focus on more than just being
Yeah,
in the
but,
streets.
but those cops on the street are walking. And how many cops are you going to need? So if you have a district that is a square mile, how many cops are you going to need to be covering that whole district by foot? So if there's a murder or if there's an assault on the other corner and your cops are on the street by foot, how are they going to get over there? Or if there's a robbery at a grocery store
we're not
or a bank.
exclusively street cops.
Yeah.
There's still
I have
a mixture.
I have a question. Okay, do you believe that crime will ever be eradicated fully in our society? That we'll ever
It's
see
like not
a society?
possible. That's like
Okay, then how
miracle.
can your theory ever work in a world where you don't focus on sanctions? When people, no matter how many people you
We
stop
focus
killing
on
in the streets,
repercussions too.
Where?
We
How?
disincentivize. That's what cops do. They punish things.
Where in your theory does it say that like you're going to focus on tougher sanctions and imposing sanctions? And where, like, okay, what kind of sanctions are you going to impose on people peeing in the street?
You better go.
I can answer that.
Okay.
I think you need the bathroom.
The thing with our theory is, what we're trying to do is, what you guys are doing is let's say crime is like a bush. Stick with me on this. What you're doing is you're trimming this bush by getting rid of the top. Now, let's say that this bush is in front of a window and you have a great view outside your house, and then this bush continues to always be obscuring your view, and you're just going through and you're cutting it, right where the window begins. In 2 weeks, crime adapts. That bush has grown back to where it obscures your vision. What our theory is to go in and just uproot the damn thing and throw it away, and then you're gone. Your trouble is gone forever. Does it take longer than snipping? Yeah, it does. Will it cost more to do it? It does. But in the long run, it's going to work better.
Are you uprooting, or are you just pouring poison on it and waiting for it to die 50
How aren't
years
we
from now?
uprooting? We're the ones focusing specifically on
But
that
you're
one
taking
bush,
you're
taking it
taking
up,
those
removing
branches.
Right, we got the shears.
Yeah, we got the shears. You don't got the shears.
Yes. But can the shears? Here's the thing.
Alright, you guys
Let's
are
say
under the
this-
assumption that your method's going to take 6 months. What happens when it takes 5 years? Are you going to sit back and say, we need to think of another method, or we need to put more police on this?
Yeah, but your method's gonna take like a whole generation.
We know that. But you're under the assumption that it's 6 months, and you're saying it's going to cost this much for 6 months. When it takes 5 years, I mean, what's going to be the defense of your argument at that point? When yours costs more than ours does in 6 months, but all of a sudden it's taking just as long. How are you going to justify
I suppose
it?
your cost depends on more how many things you concentrate on and stuff like that, and that depends on how effective it is too.
But on the other hand is, so if it takes a little longer than we planned, the ultimate goal is if we can put less people in the prisons. So if you're taking one person because you take out one drug dealer, another one comes in, you take out one, another one comes in, and if you're doing this for 30, 40 years, every single one you're filling in, so you're sending them to jail. And so every time you're sending them to jail, that's costing taxpayers money. And with those larger sentences, because we're paying for their prison time, we're paying for those expenses. But if we go in and take out 30 at once, yeah, okay, so we're paying for 30 of them at that one time in jail now, and that's going to be expensive. But by creating that void where all of a sudden there's no other drug dealers filling in that gap, we're not paying for one every month or every 3 weeks when they put them to jail.
There will always be drug dealers.
Yeah. Don't you think it's a little naive to think that drug dealers are going to stop selling drugs because you tell them they're going to get punished if they get caught?
It actually worked in New York. Like,
For what, a half
I mean,
year?
No.
Yeah.
Okay. It said it moved, and then it said it's not completely stopped. It just said it went down to normal levels.
People deal drugs because they think they can make money doing it, and if we take away that thought by showing them that if they deal drugs, they will be punished and they will lose years of their lives and time and money.
That's the way it's been forever. They've always punished drug dealers.
But
People
we're
still
saying
do it.
punish them more effectively, more efficiently, and punish them better.
And if there's always going to be drug dealers, then how is your theory ever going to be effective? If you claim that there's always going to be
never use our theories.
See, the thing about us though is we're trying to change the culture and the thought process of our citizens.
We're addressing
But you're not
both.
punishing them,
No,
so
and
how are you
No,
ever
we're
going
still
to-
punishing them. The current law punishes drug
So
dealers.
when-
The current law punishes drug dealers.
But obviously not
here's
enough
our
for them
problem.
to
We
always
don't think the
exist.
current law is effective enough. So if you have the current law that's punishing drug dealers, but because they're only punished once in every 100 drug deals, they're punished. Okay, so once in every 100, so their odds of getting punished
I'd
is not
say they're a
that
little
much.
bit better than
So
1 in
they're cops.
100.
But by us taking the law and making sure 99 out of every 100 drug deals goes punished, all of a sudden their incentive for doing a drug deal and their probability of them being caught goes up and their incentive drastically decreases. So we're taking the same law and we're making it more effective by punishing everyone we can see.
How do you propose 99 out of 100?
I'm just saying, but by dynamic concentrating, if we wipe out all 30 drug dealers in this neighborhood, well then, if we're wiping out every single one there, essentially every drug deal went, or every drug dealer went punished. So 30 out of the 30 drug dealers went punished instead of 5 out of the 30 drug dealers, or 1 out of the 30.
You aren't reducing the demand for drugs. There's still going to be the same demand for drugs, which always creates, the drug dealers. We're going to reduce the demand by getting at the core.
I can kill that argument.
Lower demand, lower drug.
All right, that's the thing. If we if we make the supply decrease of drugs, right? This is economics right here. We make it way more expensive for them to deal the drugs, then the price for the drugs is going to skyrocket, right? Meaning that a lot of people won't be able to afford them, will get out of the culture by either dying because of withdrawal, which is
or stealing
too bad. But
to pay for the
yeah,
committing more smaller crimes. We'll address the social cost. So if they don't want to use drugs,
drugs will become more expensive, and slowly as that keeps happening, they will phase out of our culture.
Okay.
Right.
As shown in the HOPE study, you guys are saying that this isn't going to be effective because it's going to cost a lot of money, and these drug dealers are always going to be drug dealers. But in the HOPE case, they had these 30 people on probation who kept committing the crime of doing meth. And they took this group of people and they laid out the clear rules that if they did meth again, that they would have to spend 7 days in jail. So as they did this, they laid this out for them. Half of the people did it again. But those half people right away were punished instead of waiting around for a punishment or not being punished at all like they would have been before this. And then after they were punished, only half of those people did meth again. So this slow, gradual decrease of the people committing the crime is what makes it effective. The immediate punishment.
That's not dynamic concentration. That's just reduction in punishment
It's like a
and
drug
increase
rehab
in. That's like
that is dynamic. How is it we're concentrating on one group of people?
no. It's like changing your punishment. Like we could do that too. We could make punishment not
Where's
as
the
strong.
empirical proof of your guys', like, we've been giving you examples of our theory working, like, give me some examples of where broken windows theory has worked.
New York. Rudy Giuliani did that in New York and drastically reduced the crime rate. That was
Columbia.
What up, Columbia?
Yeah.
No, it did.
How did it reduce the crime rate?
Columbia?
Down.
Yeah.
Okay, so obviously you guys are saying that our theory has not been backed by verifiable actions, while yours has been implemented. Crime hasn't been fixed, and you guys keep giving us examples of when your crime is being used, your salt is being used. Obviously, it's not working.
That's because
Actually, your theory was implemented in the 1970s, and ours is fairly new. It's from the 1990s.
70s were awesome.
So your theory is actually implemented 30 years before ours. So it's been going on longer than ours has.
I think the broken windows was. I think actually Columbia was a great example of it because they changed the social attitude and they started knocking on like little things, just like jaywalking and traffic violations, and that had a major effect. Like, would they reduce their homicide rate by like 75%? It was unbelievable just because they changed their social attitude. That's what it was all about. They didn't just go right after the murderers and the drug dealers. They started at the very bottom with normal everyday citizens that thought it was okay to do little things that were wrong, and they stopped it. Like, that's a perfect example right there.
And like we were talking about, like I was trying to say about the culture is then when people start
Culture, what up?
recognizing like committed to doing it earlier to make a better community for themselves.
All right. Throughout history, if you have unsupervised cops, making periodic interactions with people on the street, to the point where they get to know the people on the street, that's when corruption in the police force is at its highest and is a huge problem. How would you deal with worrying about?
Give me some data. That's an assumption.
We would disincentivize.
We would disincentivize. That's so subjective.
We would disincentivize.
Do you have any one example on that?
We would disincentivize that.
All right. I can answer that.
Punish
Here's
that.
the thing. Right now, when you have a cop in a car, when is the time you have face-to-face interaction? It's probably when you haven't been doing anything good. I mean, if you're outside with a cop, you've done something bad because he's out of his car, and so then that face-to-face interaction is a bad time. I mean, it's not a good thing. However, if you take these cops and you start putting them on the ground, and people start having face-to-face conversations and face-to-face interaction with these cops, and it's in good situations, that makes a view on a cop so much better. And what is the thing that cops hate most about their jobs? Is people interacting with them. If you have cops who are positively influencing the neighborhood, and the neighborhood positively influences the police, that takes down corrupt cops.
See, I don't agree with that. If you put cops on the street walking past this, let's say you're walking through a block that you walk through every day, and you see someone peeing outside of every building, and you get rid of them, but it happens again and again. And what do you do when you get to know the shop owner and you like one better, or one, let's say, pays you $100? Let's say you only have time to remove half of them. The guy who pays you $100, you go remove his. You don't have time to remove all the others. So suddenly now you got a whole people like knowing that the cops are a little dirty, and you got bribes going every which way. And
what happens when the drug dealers are paying the cops? Leave them alone. It's the same thing.
You just implement punishment for cops.
The thing is, if you have a structured attack on drug dealing as a society, you're not gonna have cops out there just being like, "Hey, I'm about to bust you for a drug deal. Oh wait, here's $100. Okay, I won't."
No, but when your strategic attacks go in and they are busting a drug dealer, and your theory before has gone in and given them the ultimatum: either keep dealing drugs or go to jail. You're getting that option right now. What if they also said, or you can pay me $1 million and you'll never hear from me again?
See, that's the thing is, like, if we have a structured, organized thing with warrants and stuff like that, you can't just be like, make a warrant go away. That's the thing.
$1 million goes a long way.
I have a question that's completely.
But like, how many drug dealers are just gonna drop it?
You guys, the examples that you use are basically in places where the wheels have fallen off, where it seems like you're kind of trying to clean up an anarchy kind of situation. How can you say that using this bottom-up kind of strategy of clearing the streets would work in Minneapolis, where people aren't on the streets peeing? At least I haven't seen any, and it's not it's not as dire as it would be in maybe some of these areas where, as with the
crime rate's not as high in
the tactical insertion kind of idea would go into these places and focus on the crimes, whereas you're kind of taking this like third world kind of, if the murder rates are going down by 75%, is that really applicable to Minneapolis?
And the beautiful thing is we can use a hybrid here, so we can use like both. So we can address both problems.
Way to take a side, man.
Well, yeah, no. I mean, like, that's what I'm for, too. It's like, actually,
a hybrid will work better. You do dynamic concentration, and then if there's an area that's really bad, you concentrate a little more on that one while still keeping concentration in other areas, and still keeping the social gathering to get farther.
Let's just end it on our
the thing that's different with broken windows rather than dynamic concentration is, with dynamic concentration, in every societal issue, there's the big major problems are murder, drug deals, homicide, theft, high theft. But in broken windows, we're tackling some small issues, and it's different from city to city. And you're going to tackle different issues in one city, and you can't compare the results of that city to issues of another city in which you're tackling a whole different topic because their small issues are a bit different than the small issues of another city.
So we can't compare the results of
No.
Bogota to Minneapolis because their issues are different than our issues.
The major problem with yours is you don't address the root causes of crime like gateway crime and stuff like that.
I think you guys think that a gateway crime is a cause for crime. No, a gateway crime is just something that
It
you get
just
into
leads
in
to
between.
the slippery
I don't think
slope
it does.
type
I think the cause for crime is seeing an economic advantage and not having the morals to not take the economic advantage. So if we take away that economic advantage, we're taking away the whole cause for crime right there.
But that's what our justice system does. We're trying to take away incentives for criminals too.
If you guys are going after major
But
crime,
I think we're doing it in a more efficient way.
you guys are going after major crime, and drugs is one thing, like that's big. But if you're addressing major crime like rape, homicide, murder, and drugs, are you going to go up to murderers and say, if you murder again, you're going to go to jail, or a rapist, if you rape again, you're going to go to jail? Like you can't see those things. You can't see those things before they happen.
The big part of dynamic concentration we talked about in our opening is that one big component is warning criminals of the exact punishment they will receive for committing a crime. If you do X, you will get Y, and it's guaranteed for you. If you kill a person, if you do it in this way, it's this crime or this punishment.
That's so easy to say though, because they don't know who commits murders, they don't know who commits rapes until way after the fact. I mean, it's not as easy as seeing a drug deal happen.
Statistically the areas of a city where homicide is highest, where rape is highest, where drug deals are highest. By focusing on that one area where homicide rates are the highest, you go in there, your whole police force, almost all of it, is focused on that one area. You warn the people around that these are the exact new punishments for committing homicide. The incentive goes down, and if you reach a certain threshold, once you are able to eliminate murders in that area, it sends a message to the area right next door that, okay, obviously they're going to come for us next. It's going to be the exact same thing.
That means absolutely nothing though, because there's no incentive, there's no economic incentive at least to murder someone, I guess, unless it's like, unless you're going to be a mafia.
The punishment is going to deter them. The punishment already doesn't
exactly.
deter them.
The punishment is already life in prison or the death penalty.
You're missing one of the big differences.
Punishment, the whole thing with dynamic concentration is that you deliver punishment quick, you deliver it swift and hard. It's not let's wait 3 months to punish you. It's we're going to punish you now, and this is what it's going to be, and it's going to be a strong disincentive for you.
That's the way it's always been. The U.S. Constitution, when you have to be judged by trial with your peers, you have to have evidence.
Don't think we're just going to be like, oh, you're accused of being murdered. Here, go to jail for the rest of your life. It's you still get the chance to prove you're assumed innocent.
If you have more people available to focus on these crimes. When your cops are all spread out around 5 different districts at once, they're not able effectively to give people due process of law quick and efficiently.
We still have some cops in those areas, and that will address part of the problem.
But when you concentrate 95% of your police force as opposed to 5% of your
95% of your police force, and the other 5% of the city will be very
it's an arbitrary number. It's the theory behind it.
But the point is the
incentive for these people that are murdering is that so many people are getting away with it, and that's what dynamic concentration is based on. Is they're trying to eliminate these people getting away with it. So by focusing on this one area with all of these police officers, less people are going to be getting away with it because you have more people focused on this crime, not as much on there's more police officers for the small space. And so there's not as much, it's easier to figure out these crimes, and less people are getting away with them. That's their incentive, is that they are getting away with it. It's not economic, it's that they're getting away with it, and that's what we're trying to eliminate for these bigger crimes.
And it's not that, as we're doing dynamic concentration on a neighborhood in North Minneapolis, it's not that at the same time you can't have the other police officers. So if you have 40%, 50% of our police force focusing on North Minneapolis, that doesn't mean the other 50% aren't in the other neighborhoods doing broken windows. I mean, they're out there. Just because we're concentrating a larger portion of our police force on one district compared to the other
So you're saying you're using a hybrid.
Bottom line, you're going to have to, because as using Jesse's Bush analogy. Well,
it comes through the
I mean, if you truly want to get rid of the problem, you're going to have to do a combo, because maybe at one point in time, you don't have the time to pull out the ruts. and you trim it down, and you come back later and pull out the roots. You're just going to have to use a hybrid eventually to get there.
The point is, our theory takes a city of 250,000 people and turns it into 250,000 police officers, where everyone polices themselves and everyone in the community is watching out for each other, because that's the best way to know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, but
Except for the police officers then that are still criminals, because you can never
it's just a model. It's not 100%.
Right.
I mean, but like the point of ours is to take the number of criminals that think that doing a crime is something that would be profitable and turn that to zero. There'd be no crimes except for the ones
That's the whole
are,
criminal justice system is trying to do. Just disincentivize crime, and that's what we try to do too. And we try to do that by.
Well, but you guys are trying to change the culture so that the people
No, we don't just don't focus on that. We focus on punishing crimes too, obviously.
All right, guys, do you want to give a last 30 seconds statement on your side?
Think of it as a football play. If dynamic concentration is a blitz and everyone blitzes a quarterback, he's going to throw a touchdown pass right down the middle because there's going to be no one there. That's the C. C round. C round. That's exactly
Last line from the dynamic concentration people.
There's a hole in the bottom of the sea, of the ocean, and in that hole is crime. And if you don't go after that crime in a specific area, it's not going to work.